Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Jose Youngs here, the MMAfighting.com, to bring you a fantastic, action-packed preview show with the bad boy himself, Alex K. Lee. You know him from fun fights. You know him from his prediction pieces. I always like doing these preview shows with him. The last one I believe we did together was in that Edmonton card, but the team is back. The bad boy to my left and me, Jose Youngs, host of the A-Side Live Chat, are in your life once again. But Alex, we have a lot to talk about. 3 fight cards, 2 of them MMA, 1 of them boxing. We're going to start with UFC DC. The UFC Octagon is touching down in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., headlined by a heavyweight tilt between Alistair Overeem, former Dream Champion, former K1 Champion, former Strikeforce Champion, former UFC title challenger, taking on Jairzinho Rosen, who coming off that blistering knockout win over Andrei Arlovski. I spoke to him immediately after. I asked him if he would be willing to step in to face Alistair Overeem after Alistair Overeem's original opponent, Walt Harris, pulled himself from the card for reasons that we don't have to get into with the loss of his stepdaughter. He was rightfully pulled himself out of the card. His head wasn't in the game. Rosen is now facing Overeem. Rosen has looked phenomenal inside the octagon. Alistair Overeem has more fights in the UFC, I believe, than Rosen has career wins combined. But he has trained with Tyrone Spong in the past, former training partner and opponent of Alistair Overeem. What do you make of this main event?
It's a very solid main event. I want to say, first of all, that this is a solid card, especially to come back to after 2 weeks, 2 precious weeks of no UFC. I mean, it was going wrong. It was great to have 12 weeks of cards. You know, I'm sure, a lot to watch, but I think it was also good to have a breather. I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels that way. And this card is right in that sweet spot with recognizable names, competitive fights, a little bit of contender stakes. So, for anyone who's kind of like, yes, I'm ready to jump back into the UFC, I think they again, I don't know how much they can sort of plan these things ahead of time, but I think it's going to work out for them. It's a quality main event. It's interesting that Overeem, I think we all know I hesitate to say gatekeeper because he's still probably one of the 7 or 8 best heavyweights in the world. And I get it, beating him is what you do to get to the top 5, to get a title shot, as we saw from, Francis Ngannou, of course, and Curtis Blaydes, who, should get a title shot at some point if he can get back, string a few wins together. And Jair seems right in that path, right? He's a knockout specialist. He's getting Overeem coming off of 2 wins. It's the perfect setup for him to establish that he himself is a legitimate contender. And I don't want to spoil our own Dave Meltzer will have a piece on why it's important for Rosenstruck to win on Saturday, not just for his own career, but to keep the heavyweight division fresh. So look out for that. That'll be this week. It should be out by the time this comes out, and I agree with that premise. A Rosenstruck win is not essential to the division, but it would certainly keep things very, very fresh.
Yeah, I don't know if it's essential. I just like this fight in terms of because I love kickboxing, high level elite kickboxing. Alistair Overeem, like I said, was a former K1 champion, one of the best strikers in the heavyweight division. I think Jairzinho has 80, 78, 75 career kickboxing matches. He had that long string of wins. He's undefeated. He's 9-0. He's actually fought in Ryzen. He fought Ryzen in 2018, and then he strung together 3 straight TKO wins in the UFC. But this is very reminiscent of Alistair Overeem's fight against Francis Ngannou, where Alistair Overeem said, "I'll test him." Like Francis Ngannou was coming off all that string of knockouts. I believe he knocked out Andrei Arlovski, and then he fought Alistair Overeem immediately after that. I might be wrong on the timeline there, but I know he has that uppercut knockout on Arlovski, where Arlovski literally left his feet inside the octagon and fell down. Overeem fought him, and then that, I believe, was the knockout of the year on MMAfighting.com, one of the most violent knockouts you'll ever see, where he decapitated Overeem. And then Overeem, he's one of those guys that he'll lose 3 in a row or 2 in a row, and then he'll win 2 or 3 in a row. He lost to Francis Ngannou, Curtis Blaydes by TKO, nothing to hang your head at the time, 2 up-and-coming young, hungry heavyweights. Like you said, facing Alistair Overeem, gatekeeper, as you called him. I didn't call you that, I didn't call you that, Alistair. It was AK.
No.
It was 2 TKO losses back-to-back, and then he beats Sergey Pavlovich in Beijing, and then he beats Alexei Oleinik, both by TKO. So this guy is he's been in the UFC for a long. He debuted in 2011, I believe, against Brock Lesnar, and he's been in the UFC for like what 7-8 years. And I can remember a time when Alistair Overeem was like the man that the UFC wanted for the not just the heavyweight division, but he was like the guy. He was the Eddie Alvarez before Eddie Alvarez, where we got to get Alistair Overeem in the UFC, and now he's been in the UFC for 8 or 9 years. Time flew by. He's fought for the UFC heavyweight championship before. He's fought anyone they put in front of him. I interviewed him once, and he said he doesn't care who he fights. He just likes to compete, and if he loses by knockout, it just makes him want to compete even more. So this was a tough matchup for me because these are the fights that typically Alistair Overeem loses, especially when a guy that really has nothing to lose in Jairzinho. So I'm going to put you on the spot, Alex. What is your prediction for the main event of UFC DC between Alistair Overeem and Jairzinho Rosenstraut?
Well, first of all, if Overeem, if getting knocked out makes him want to compete even more, then he must be he must love competition more than anyone else in the world, because the poor guy, I won't say poor guy, he knows what he signed up for. He has been on the receiving end of many knockouts,
13 and
many, boy, and really bad ones too. Like we said, the last two, the Ngannou just popped his chin off, and Curtis Blades, the ground and pound. Oh my gosh, that was so nasty.
Cut him open like a can.
But hey, back-to-back first-round knockouts himself. He gives as good as he gets. He always has. That's to Overeem's credit for sure. I am the worst person in the world at picking fights. One, we know this. Two, I am very, very slow to get on the bandwagon, to notice when the winds are changing. So this is the perfect storm for me. So obviously, I am picking Alistair Overeem to stop the hype train of Jairzinho. I think I said this before the Arlovski fight. I actually thought Arlovski would give Rosenstruck problems too. My picks are terrible. Anyone who reads my predictions, they're bad. They're bad. I mean, you should read them to see how bad they are. But I was so wrong about that. The Arlovski Rosenstruck pick was a horrible pick. And I'll tell you, I am not wrong this time. Alistair Overeem is going to put on a clinic and teach this up and comer, what it means to be a top ranked heavyweight contender for the better part of like 15 years.
Well, I said before we got on the air that I would pick opposite of you in every single fight you pick, so I am picking Jairzinho for this one. He has what we in the business like to call the touch of death. The only other person I can really think that has that is Francis Ngannou right now. I mean, when you watch his fight against Andrei Arlovski, it doesn't even look like he hit him that hard. He touched him maybe once, and Andrei Arlovski fell on his face. Esther Lynn, our photographer, captured a beautiful image of him face down, and Jairzinho just kind of looking at his work as the former UFC heavyweight champion just collapsed onto the canvas. And before that, he beat Alan Crowder in 9 seconds. That's only 4 seconds slower than the fastest knockout in UFC history. Alan Crowder, obviously famous for his fight against Greg Hardy, and then immediately after got knocked out in 9 seconds to Jairzinho. So I will pick Jairzinho Rosenstruck for this one, considering he has the touch of death, and lately these young up-and-coming heavyweights that Alistair Overeem is put against, he tends to not fare too well. And even before his 2 previous TKO losses, he was knocked out by Stipe Miocic in a fight that I thought he would have won if he had gone for the finish, gone for the strikes on the ground rather than for that guillotine in the first round. So Alistair Overeem could have been the heavyweight champion then. I still think he could be. The heavyweight division is just so in flux. But I am picking Jairzinho. The bad boy is picking Alistair Overeem. He's probably wrong, per usual.
I should say I make it very easy to pick opposite me. By the way, this is not. Yes. If for anyone who's watching, like, oh no, they're just manufacturing, picking opposites. No, I am sticking by my opinion, and I guarantee Jose is too.
Rosenstruck has what his kickboxing. He's only 9-0 in MMA, but he has like 70+ kickboxing matches. It's like people considering him a combat prospect is. Like, we call him that because he's a prospect in MMA.
MMA prospect.
MMA prospect. This guy has seen everything in the world of kickboxing. He's facing a former kickboxing champion. So these are the type of fights I like. 2 guys that are very elite at what they do. This is similar to when Overeem fought Mark Hunt. I was really excited for that fight. And Overeem got him with that flying knee and then finished him against the octagon. So maybe that happens again. But I'm picking Jairzinho. Alex is picking Alistair Overeem. We're going to move down to the co-main event before we break down the rest of the card.
Alistair, I just want to say, Alistair, show off your submissions, man. Come on, just make everybody boo you. Go for a takedown, make him submit him. Come on, Alistair.
Well, most of his submissions are when people shoot in on him and he catches the neck. That's why if you look at his record, he has so many submission wins by guillotine because he was so good on his feet that people would shoot in to take him out of his element. And he trained his guillotine, his counter guillotine so much that his best defense was the threat of the guillotine. So he was so good at that one move that you didn't want to shoot in on him. So it's similar to like Cowboy Cerrone and Carlos Condit off their back, where they're so good with those triangles that their defense is the threat of their offense off their back. So, but I'm still picking Jairzinho. I already said it. I'm on record. AK speaking Alistair Overeem. We're going to move down to the co-main event. Marina Rodriguez versus Cynthia Calvillo. Interesting matchup here. Cynthia Calvillo's been in the UFC for a minute. Marina Rodriguez is a veteran of the UFC, of Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series. She's undefeated, or I shouldn't say undefeated, unbeaten. She's 12-0-1, does have that draw against Randa Marcos from 2018. I love this fight. Marina Rodriguez coming off that win over Tisha Torres. I believe Cynthia Calvillo has been on the shelf for a little bit, a couple of injuries, banged up. She beat Courtney Casey on the UFC on ESPN 1 card in Phoenix. I was there for that. The crowd did not like that fight. That's when a lot of the waves started, and they brought out the cell phone lights. I didn't think it was justified. I think it was like just a violent chess match of who's going to throw first. What do you make of this fight? And I believe Cynthia was supposed to fight Claudia Gadelha before she fell off and Marina Rodriguez stepped up. I actually like this fight better. Cynthia Calvillo is our old former coworker Danny Segura and I were coming up with this list of BMF fighters on the A side once, and someone goes, "What females would be on the BMF list?" We both said Cynthia Calvillo is on the short list. Well, she'll fight anyone. She kind of has that mean mug look about her. But what do you make of this co-main event fight between Marina Rodriguez and Cynthia Calvillo?
Yeah, solid matchup. I mean, look, I know that some people will complain. They might feel that Calvillo's gotten kind of a I don't say unwarranted push. I think she started off her UFC career with some solid wins. She certainly is a good interview. You know, that goes a long way when you're coming up in the UFC. So I think it's certainly warranted. As we look at the rest of the card, you know, I don't think there's anything necessarily that I would put over this as the co-main event. We'll say there's just Struve Rothwell, but I don't know if you need to go heavyweight. I think it's good to mix it up. And again, if you're trying to build up names like Calvillo or even Rodriguez, who's unbeaten, you have to risk giving them this kind of exposure. So it should be a good fight. Like you said, Calvillo usually pretty exciting. Last time maybe not the case, but. I like the matchup. It seems like a classic striker versus grappler. You know, you never want to oversimplify things, but at least on paper, that's what it looks like to me. Rodriguez, for sure, I think a lot of people are sleeping on her, but Tisha Torres, always a solid win. And Jessica Aguilar, yes, you know, maybe Jag, not quite in her prime anymore, so I'm sure people want to overlook that win, but that's still an experienced opponent. And she fought Ronda Marcos to a draw in her first UFC fight. So that's three really, really, really tough opponents for Rodriguez, and she's done a great job so far. Well, I guess we're not getting to the pick part yet, but I'll just say about evaluating the matchup. Yes, excellent co-main event. Not sure what more you could ask for. It definitely has contendership implications.
Yeah, and if you look at Cynthia Calvillo's record, like she does have that win over Courtney Casey, but then her first two fights were main card on pay-per-view. She fought UFC 209. She was on the prelims. I think got elevated to the main card after Tony Ferguson fell off. She beat Amanda Cooper. She fought Pearl Gonzalez on the main card, UFC 210. That was the DC Anthony Johnson 2. That was the main card, 2 back-to-back pay-per-views. And then she flies to Scotland and beats Joanne Calderwood, pride of Scotland, in Scotland, and then fights Carla Esparza, UFC 219, comes up short. A lot of people thought she won. So, yeah, she got that big push, but she got that push for a reason. She was on big cards and she was winning. She has the win over Montana De La Rosa on the LFA scene. She has the win over Jillian Robertson on the global knockout scene. So she had big wins over big names even before she got into the UFC. Marina Rodriguez, I think, is a really big step up in competition. Tisha Torres, yes, is a phenomenal fighter, but the Tisha Torres that she fought was coming off, I think, 3 straight losses. So now she's on that 4-fight losing streak. To be fair to Tisha, she lost to Jessica Andrade, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and Weili Zhang. So one current champion and 2 former champions before that. She lost to Rosen Namajunas, so she's only lost to the champions of the UFC. So Tisha Torres, great fighter. Marina Rodriguez kind of walked through her on that, I think it was the Uruguay card. So I'm going to say Marina Rodriguez wins. I think she keeps the unbeaten streak going. But this is a 50-50 fight for me. I say that with zero confidence behind it.
Naturally, I'm going with Calvillo. No deep analysis for me on this one. I almost always favor sort of high pressure grapplers over strikers. Again, maybe Rodriguez has better takedown defense than I'm giving her credit for, but I will just lean towards Calvillo for the grappling superiority.
And then again, that's a really tough. We were talking before we even got on air, or before we even shot this, and every single fight seems like a 50-50 fight for me. Even the main event is very close. I obviously Overeem would most obviously be the betting favorite, but other than that, going down, there's not a lot of fights I would pick that I'd be really confident in picking the winner. But outside of the main event and co-main event, are there any other fights that you, the bad boy Alex K. Lee, the founder of Fun Fights, would like to highlight?
That's right. We should have prefaced this that this is almost like an addition, an extended
Sure.
Fun Fights this week, or also an extra A side, however people want to look at it. I think one of the main card fights I really want to look at, Cody Stamann and Song Yadong. Man, both, Stamann, maybe he's I don't know if what was his last fight? So I got to look. He beat Turbo, Alejandro Perez.
Yes.
It wasn't a fight that some people didn't like. He used a lot of wrestling, and some people weren't crazy about that. But the guy's a good wrestler. That's what he does. He rebounded from that win over Aljamain Sterling. It's very important win for him. And pardon me. Song is he's streaking. He's unbeaten in the UFC. Probably one of these guys that fans are sleeping on. I know I have been. I think I don't remember if I had to pick his last fight, but I've definitely overlooked him as a prospect. But you go 4-0. He's also beaten Turbo. Gosh, I don't like that name. And now, yeah. So now this is a legitimate whoever wins this fight. I'm not saying they jump into the top 10. Stamann was kind of in there previously because of how he debuted, but they're right up there, probably top 12, definitely in the top 15. And it'd be amazing for Yadong to pick up a win here and maybe join Zhang Weili as one of China's stars.
Why, when Uriah Faber was a guest on the A-side once, he had Song Yadong on his short list of future champions, and the last two guys he said that to were T.J. Dillashaw and Cody Garbrandt. So whenever Uriah Faber kind of like spotlights one of his Team Alpha Male fighters as a future champion, then you can really kind of you have to pay attention given his track record. But other than that, Cody Stamann, great fight. Song Yadong, phenomenal fight. Stefan Struve returns from his very brief 9-month retirement, taking on Ben Rothwell. Two guys that have been around, like we're talking about Alistair Overeem having a million fights. Like these two guys have been stalwarts of the UFC heavyweight division for seems like 10 years, maybe even longer. Ben Rothwell actually has a win over Alistair Overeem on that UFC Connecticut card when it was at Foxwoods Casino, and then Stefan Struve famously lost to Alistair Overeem in Phoenix when Junior Dos Santos beat Stipe Miocic in the main event, and Nate Diaz lost Rafael Dos Anjos in the co-main event. People forget about that. Aspen Ladd returns facing Yana Kunitskaya. That's a phenomenal fight. Aspen Ladd, her first fight since that knockout loss to Jermaine Durandam. He's now fighting Amanda Nunes coming up in UFC 245. Aspen Ladd has that struggle to, if anything, I'm very interested in that weigh-in because she has famously struggled to make weight. She had that situation with the California State Athletic Commission where she was like, they only treated me differently because I'm a woman. Rob Font facing Ricky Simone in the prelim fights. I actually thought Rob Font was going to face Cody Stamann. Instead, they had been kind of linked in the past. Rob Font from the Boston area, so I'm from the New England area. I've interviewed him enough times, and Ricky Simone's coming off that knockout loss to Uriah Faber, which is nothing to hang your head at. So a lot of fun fights. That's not even to mention Thiago Alves is coming back, former UFC welterweight title challenger Tim Means, two guys that have been in the welterweight division for a long time. And then Bryce Mitchell, everyone likes Bryce Mitchell, gets the camo, hopefully gets his camo shorts back. I believe you had to write a few times of his very graphic injury, so I'm sure you're interested.
We really don't need to talk about that anymore. No need to bring that up anymore. Let's never speak of that again.
Sure.
And then Matt Wyman's fight.
That's what I was about to say.
Matt Wyman, Thiago Alves, Tim Means, man, Stefan Struve, Ben Rothwell. Man, these guys, I tell you, these guys, they're not going to hang it up. They're just not going to hang it up.
It's a bummer that we don't get, speaking of hanging it up, it's a bummer we're losing out on Mickey Gall versus Carlos Condit because Carlos Condit did get hurt. Mickey Gall didn't get a replacement opponent. But phenomenal fight card. I think every single fight is pretty 50-50. I'm really, really excited for that Rob Font, Ricky Simone, and Cody Stamann, Song Yadong fights in general. I bet the winners could face each other next. That's two marquee bantamweight fights. But we're going to move right along to, there's another MMA fight card on December 7th, and that is Combate Americas. With headline.
Some would say, you say another. Some would say the most important fight card this weekend. Some like say, Campbell McLaren would certainly say so.
Campbell McLaren would say a lot of things. Campbell McLaren would say half of the main event is the number one light heavyweight on planet Earth. Tito Ortiz, former light heavyweight champion Tito Ortiz, former UFC and Bellator veteran, facing Alberto Del Rio, or Alberto El Patron, whatever you want to call him. Wasn't he Dos Caras Jr. for a hot minute too? on the
Yes.
CMLL scene. He is taking,
according to Cal McLaren, these are the number 1 Tito and number 3 Alberto of the top 40 top 10 pound for pound fighters over 40. So really, I don't know how people can pass on this matchup.
Well, it's $39.99 last I heard. It's in, I believe it's, where is it? Hidalgo, Texas. It's way far south, and if I'm not mistaken, it's about as far south as you can go and still be in the United States. But, it's in McAllen, Texas. I correct myself. That's still incredibly far.
McAllen, you're right.
McAllen, Texas.
They've been putting Hidalgo, and they've been putting Hidalgo. They built it as Hidalgo before, but yes, McAllen, Texas.
McAllen, Texas. I had the opportunity to speak with Alberto Del Rio at his gym here in Arizona. He's very excited. He's like, I don't even want to do media anymore. I just want to fight this guy. This is a one and done for him, he said. I was like very adamant, like, if you win, why not keep fighting? He goes, this is one and done. He went through a very he went through a very difficult divorce when there was a lot of turmoil in his life, and Combate America stuck by him, and Kevin McLaren had been badgering him to fight for so long that he used this opportunity to give back to Combate Americas by coming out of retirement. This is his first fight in like 9 or 10 years. This man has a knockout loss to Mirko Krokop where he wore a lucha mask and got kicked in the head. So in the Pride days. So this man has fought for, I believe 9-5, which is obviously Tito Ortiz has more UFC fights than that man has career fights. He made the National Wrestling Olympic team for Mexico in 2000. Obviously, Mexico did not make the Olympics for wrestling in Sydney, Australia, so didn't get a chance to compete for a gold medal or even compete for a medal in general. But what do you make of this fight card? What do you make of the fight? I know there's a lot of injuries that have caused turmoil to this main card, but what do you think of WWE champion Alberto Del Rio taking on former UFC champion Tito Ortiz, and their tagline, what side are you on?
I love it. I love everything they've done with this. Look, the $39.99 price tag, I don't know how that's going to sound with some people. It might seem a little too high. That's fine, if that's your opinion. Again, I'm not the one who gauges these things. I'm sure they have a team that's tests the waters a little bit and to know if this is a reasonable price. But as far as it being a pay-per-view headliner, yeah, I think it's a super cool pay-per-view headliner. I know seeing Tito retire and come back, retire and come back, retire and come back is not like it's not the most enjoyable thing to see. You do worry about the guy's health, but for the most part, it's the guy seems to be enjoying what he's doing. Hopefully he's not taking too much extra brain damage. Combate was a very, very logical fit for him. He's been such a proud Mexican American for so long. And, when that signing happened, it was almost like I'd almost forgotten that he'd retired. I was like, oh, yeah, that just makes sense that he would go from Bellator to Combate. So, good pairing there. Alberto, of course, has been involved with Combate for a while now, first serving as sort of a public face and ambassador type guy, and now deciding, hey, I'm you is a big test, right? There's a difference between having that hardcore viewership that you've established and then making the move into people paying, as we said, $39.99 for a product. But for their first pay-per-view, I think this is as good as a headliner as you can go with as far as name value and the novelty factor of it. And I like the way they built the rest of the card, because the co-main event will be their first women's title bout. It'll be a strawweight title. Melissa Martinez and Desiree Yanez. They're pushing Martinez very hard. She's 6-0, very exciting fighter, a bunch of knockouts on her record. So, whatever whatever exposure kind of trickles down from the main event to these guys can only be good for Combate Americas. Any other matchups on here that you were looking at, Jose?
Yeah, Dulce Garcia, sexy star, former luchador herself. I actually I've interviewed her in the past before. She's fought in Combate America. She's actually a very high level boxer. She's had combat sports. She's had combat sports experience before, and you could see it when Alberto Del Rio was training. They were doing like striking. It wasn't like full on sparring, but it was like pad work. Like they were like people were holding pads and they'd hit. Alberto Del Rio was hitting it, not going 100%, and there was no like pop and like whip back. Like he was like the coach was still like walking him through like techniques, and Dulce is standing there sparring or not sparring, like training with a man 3 times her size, and she's like crack, 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 crack. And she's like hitting these pads like she's been doing this forever. So just watching her warm up and train was very interesting because she comes in, she's very nice, she's very sweet, former sexy star. She's wrestled on Lucha Underground, CMLL, AAA, like all those luchador promotions around the world. But then you see her without the mask, her hair's pulled back, and she's just crushing pads on a man 3 times her size. So I'm very interested to see her fight again. And then there's obviously, like you said yourself, you're hoping that the main event brings eyes to the rest of the card. That is another reason Alberto Del Rio came back. He said that if when he does hashtag Trump 2020 a lot, whether you agree with that or not is one thing, but Alberto Del Rio is very against that because he is Mexican and he immigrated to the United States, and Tito Ortiz is very adamant for closed borders and everything. So this is, what side are you on? I asked him, like, is there like an underlying thing you're trying to ask, and are you nervous about how this could play out so close to the border? And Alberto Del Rio's like, no. Like, I don't agree with anything Tito Ortiz says. I think he's an idiot, and he's a Mexican American. He's an idiot for saying all this stuff. Alberto Del Rio actually invited the president of Mexico to the fight. That might not happen. The president of Mexico's son might come instead. Maybe Donald Trump Jr. comes too. Wouldn't that be something if we had the two president's son watching Tito Ortiz and Alberto Del Rio fight? But he himself said a lot of people are going to tune into this fight, and at the end of the day, he's just hoping a lot of the undercard fighters get some of that shine. So what you said, I think, is right on the money for what they want.
Look,
but go ahead.
They had Helen Mirren hanging out with Tito at a recent Combate America show, right? If they can get Helen Mirren, and she took a lot of pictures. She was happy to take publicity photos with Tito and to be seen there. God bless Helen Mirren. She's the greatest. So if they could get her to get on board, the president of Mexico, the president's son, Trump Jr., whatever. If they get them, great. But that's just gravy. I'm not worried about them getting them. But it would add another level of heat to this. It would add a lot of heat.
It would add a lot of heat.
Yeah, I just want to say, I hope. Here's what I honestly think, though. If Tito wanted to, I'm pretty sure he could take Alberto down in the first minute and just ground and pound him into oblivion. I hope that is not what happens. I hope that Tito knows that they're there to put on a show. Let's see a little bit of stand up. Let's see maybe a little bit of scrambling. Don't go take him down, but no, don't go 100% on him, Tito. Let's make a show out of it. I'm not saying that they would fix a fight. I don't think that's true at all. No. I want to make that clear. But as a fighter, do you have some control over how entertaining a fight can be? I think so. You can choose to stand and bang. Again, you can choose to go for submissions on the ground as opposed to go for position. So I hope Tito. I think on paper, obviously, he's the vastly superior fighter. And I hope he realizes that and doesn't just go in and smash Alberto right away. He's been saying, he wants to end this quickly, and I hope that's not the case. Again, they can really put on a show here, and I hope they do. One undercard fight I do want to talk about, just very quickly, Ricky Palacios from Contender Series. He's been with Combate for a while. This is his actually returned to Combate after he fought Contender Series and then fought on the Lydell Ortiz. I guess he just follows Tito around. He fought in the Lydell Ortiz card and picked up a great highlight in that show, knocking out Walel Watson. So I think Ricky's opening up the card, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know how finalized the bout order is, but certainly one to watch. Certainly one to watch in the preliminaries if you guys are tuning in early. It's really not a bad card, and again, if you can shell out that extra dough, you got a little extra cash to catch both this intriguing fight at the top and some of the up and comers in Combate Americas. I say give it a shot.
And another wrinkle I forgot to mention is the winner of this fight will get to take home the other one's championship belt. So if Tito Ortiz beats Alberto Del Rio will present him with his WWE championship belt, which he has wrestled for at WrestleMania. And then if Alberto Del Rio somehow wins, Tito Ortiz will present him with his former UFC heavyweight championship belt. But again, Tito Ortiz has like 5 or 6 of those, because that was back when they would get one belt for every defense.
Capturing a WWE title might put Tito above Daniel Cormier, Cain Velasquez, guys like that in the pound for pound all-time rankings. I mean, Cain tried to win a title he failed miserably against Brock Lesnar. He couldn't win a WWE championship. Cormier, we don't know if he's going to try pro wrestling someday. So Tito, what an illustrious trophy to add to his mantle if he wins a world professional wrestling title in addition to the UFC championship, the multiple title defenses. I'm just calling it like it is. You just got to look at the numbers. That's all I'm saying.
Look at my face right now. This is the face I'm going to be making when you're saying all this.
You look bemused, not amused. You look bemused.
I look puzzled That's the word I would use.
Yes.
But I think it's safe to say we're both picking Tito Ortiz to win this, though.
Yeah. Let's not do the song and dance for this one. Like, come on, Tito, please, Tito, you got to take care of business here.
But we're going to wrap it up really quick. I know AK doesn't have a whole lot to say for this last fight, but we do have the World Boxing Championship, heavyweight of the world. Andy Ruiz Jr. putting all of his belts on the line against Anthony Joshua, former champion. The man he dethroned, the man he erased the O in Anthony Joshua's perfect record by TKOing him in Madison Square Garden. This fight is now, I believe, in Saudi Arabia. I don't have a lot to say about that. I think that's a little bit of nonsense. But is there anything you want to say between Andy Ruiz Jr. and Anthony Joshua before I get into this?
Well, I'll just say, let's get out of our MMA bubble for a second here. This will probably be the most watched fight of the weekend. I imagine most watched, most talked about fight of the weekend, unless something very bad happens, with Rosen, knocking out Overeem, or the other way around. But I'll say, people come to me, Jose, all the time for my amazing boxing analysis, as you know, which is why I think we're doing this preview show. And I'll just say, look, Anthony Joshua is really big. He's very muscly. And based on that, and look at Ruiz. That guy he's chubby. He doesn't look like he has a muscle on his body. I mean, I think I don't think he stands a chance. I don't know why anyone would think he could beat Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua is friggin' diesel. So obviously, I'm going Anthony Joshua by 15-second knockout.
Yes, that is your professional opinion. Is that Anthony Joshua is tall and muscly, and as someone. I know boxing. I watched the Andy Ruiz Jr. fight, and as someone described Andy Ruiz Jr. to me, Andy Ruiz Jr. looks like a bag of soup with arms and legs. And I go, wow, that is one of the most accurate comparisons I've ever seen. But Andy Ruiz Jr. finished Anthony Joshua, one of the most exciting fights I've seen in a very long time. Andy Ruiz Jr. has some of the fastest hands you'll ever see. He's 33-1. Anthony Joshua, of course, had his all of his belts taken away. So Andy Ruiz Jr. is now the first ever Mexican-American WBA, IBF, WO, and IBO heavyweight champion of the world. The only one he's missing is Deontay Wilder's WBC heavyweight championship, which Deontay Wilder will most assuredly fight Tyson Fury next. And the winners of these two will have to fight each other for all of the belts. And then it's, as we call it, alphabet soup, because every single championship will be on the line, and we will finally have a unified heavyweight boxing champion of the world. My body cannot contain its excitement. I absolutely love this fight. Andy Ruiz Jr. was not even Anthony Joshua's original opponent. I can't even remember Anthony Joshua's original opponent because it fell apart for drug reasons and all that stuff. I believe it was Jarrell Miller. I can't even remember. I could be making that up. But Anthony Joshua looks the part. Yeah. As we in the business say, looks good getting off the bus. Andy Ruiz Jr. does not have the best tattoos, does not have the best physique, but hey, neither did Daniel Cormier, and we saw what happened with him.
Andy Ruiz Jr. looks like he should be driving the bus.
Exactly, but he also has some of the fastest hands you'll ever see in the heavyweight division. Anthony Joshua was kind of keeping him at distance, and then when he hurt him, Andy Ruiz Jr. kind of came in with his pop, 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 and he was punching up and really getting underneath his defense right there. I cannot wait for this fight. I selfishly, and I'm going to say this, preface this with the fact that I always tend to go with the Mexican American champions of the world, especially in boxing and MMA. I am very unbiased, but for boxing, it was very great to see a Mexican American heavyweight win all of the belts over. Some people say the biggest upset since Douglas over Tyson. I don't know if I'd go that far, because to me that's the biggest upset in the history of sports, let alone boxing. But Ruiz Jr. versus Anthony Joshua was way up there. I don't like how it's in Saudi Arabia. I wish this fight was in LA or New York again, or even Wembley Stadium, or even Mexico. But the WWE goes to Saudi Arabia. Why not put Anthony Joshua, Andy Ruiz Jr.?
It's where the money is.
You picked Anthony Joshua by 15-second knockout. I will pick Andy Ruiz Jr. by 7th round TKO. Yeah. But again, I say that with no confidence. It's very difficult to pick this fight, as it's similar to. I have similar feelings when Nate Diaz beat Conor McGregor, where Conor lost fair and square. And to Anthony Joshua's credit, I have never seen someone handle a loss better than he has. I mean, he had the big money fight against Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury he lost out on. He lost his record, his first ever fight in the United States. All these things happened to him, and he was right there when Andy Ruiz Jr. was presenting the belts, doing his post-fight interview. Anthony Joshua went up and put his arm around his waist and was like, congratulations, the time is yours. You won fair and square. Eddie Hearn, his promoter, did the opposite of Don King when Mike Tyson lost to Buster Douglas and said, Andy Ruiz Jr. won fair and square. We're going to set up the rematch. And that's it. Anthony Joshua had no excuses. He lost. And to me, that makes this fight so intriguing. Anthony Joshua is probably going to be training like a bat out of hell. Andy Ruiz Jr. always trains harder than anyone else. So I'm very, very excited for this fight. This is a very difficult fight for me to pick. But I'm going to have to pick Andy Ruiz Jr. Solely based on what we saw in the last fight.
And you said 7th round TK. You're going lucky number 7 again for Andy Ruiz. That's the magic round, eh?
I'm a prime number guy, too. I always have to pick prime numbers.
And the last thing I'll say about that is, for me anyway, is, I was cracking jokes before, but I will say, you said he was described as a bag of soup. Well, I mean, I guess if that's what a bag of soup hits like and boxes like, we should all be so lucky to be built like a bag of soup and have that kind of ability and achieve that kind of thing. So, obviously, huge congrats to Ruiz for getting that win, obviously, and now getting a huge, but I'm sure I haven't seen the purses yet, but a big money rematch. Again, we said it's in Saudi Arabia, so the money is definitely flowing, and hopefully a lot of that ends up in Mr. Ruiz's pocket, regardless of whether he wins or loses again on Saturday.
And let's people not forget, Anthony Joshua was like the pride of London because he won the gold medal in London for Great Britain. He was in like 2008, and then he went pro undefeated, beat Klitschko in that epic fight at Wembley Stadium. Andy Ruiz Jr.'s amateur record is 105-5, so it's not like he's never fought before. He's also 30-1 as a pro. So Tyson Fury claims he picked Andy Ruiz Jr. to win that fight. I'm not sure if I believe that. I don't know anyone that picked Andy Ruiz Jr. outside of Andy Ruiz Jr.'s friends and family. But I'm going to pick Andy Ruiz Jr. this time. But anything else you want to say about any other of the fights, or as you always say, MMA is supposed to be fun. We got a little bit of boxing throwing in this weekend. Anything else you want to say about this week of fights before we wrap this up?
Guys, get ready for the champ Tito Ortiz, because he's probably going to win. And I don't know, I can't recall if in interviews he's been saying that, we know Alberto's kind of been saying this is a one-off. I don't know if Tito's making the same guarantee. He might win that title, win the pro wrestling title, and decide to take that marketing power and squeeze out another fight against who? I don't know, but I wouldn't have predicted that he was going to fight Alberto El Patron. So I don't know what's next for Tito Ortiz. If you think you can guess what he's going to do next, more power to you. I have no idea.
He's going to fight Ryan Bader next. I guarantee it.
Oh. There we go. Cross promotion. Let's do it.
Guarantee it. But
he's calling it. Rematch.
But for Alex K. Lee, this has been Jose. This has been MMAfighting.com's official UFC DC Combate Americas and Andy Ruiz Jr. versus Anthony Joshua 2 preview show. Champion always gets top billing. I kind of forget about that. But this has been a phenomenal weekend of fights. It's been a great couple weeks of no UFC to really recharge the batteries. But now we get right into the nitty gritty with UFC 245 coming up. We got that awesome Ryzen Japan and Bellator Japan card, and then the early 2020 is looking absolutely unbelievable. But you'll hear more of us from more of us. Yes. Then stay on this YouTube channel. We have a great interview with Alberto Del Rio. This went live. I believe Guilherme Cruz was down in Brazil getting some interviews ahead of UFC 245 at Novo União. So stay on this YouTube channel. Then you can go get along with your Tuesday. We're shooting this on Tuesday. This will probably go live on Friday. But for Jose, this has been Alex. We're out.